Great, so our next speaker is Mary Solbrig. Mary is a GIS data engineer at Tableau Software, which is a company that's close to my heart because it was started partly by a professor that was in my lab at PhD. She received a master's in mathematics from the University of Washington, and her thesis was on mathematical aspects of gerrymandering. I think Mary also has a handout. I'll remind you guys one more time, that's in the back of the room there, so hopefully everybody has a copy by now. Mary, do you need a copy? I can run up and grab it.
Oh, no.
Okay, excellent.
I'll explain the purpose of the handout at the end. If you didn't get the handout, it's okay. So I want to talk about data visualization, which is kind of more my expertise. I want to talk about two things, which is how to do it at all. Because if you're going to get involved in this and you want to try and explain things to other people, data visualization and sort of explaining the data to other people effectively is going to be really important. So how do you even get started with that? And then also some tips for how to do it well, or at very least not to do it too poorly, which is a little bit about what the handout is about. So first of all, tools. The tools that I personally would use. If I'm just given a data set, I need to figure out what is in the data set. Once I figure out what's in the data set, how do I explain that to someone else and start making some charts and graphs and so forth on it? The main tool that I would use is Tableau. Of course, disclaimer, I work at Tableau, so it's free. It could also be free for you if you go to that website and you get the Tableau public version. You just can't connect to databases, but if you don't want to connect to a database, that's fine. Or if you're an academic, you can get it for free. Or you can pay my salary. It's great. On the other hand, if I wanted to do something that was either more heavily statistical, or I wanted to do something where I'm doing the same analysis on 500 data sets, I already kind of know what's in the data set, and I just want to do the same analysis on 500 data sets, or probably 50, because there's 50 states, right? Then I would probably start moving to R and Python that he demoed. Then if I wanted to do something that had more heavy geographic stuff, like I wanted to do how much of this lake is in this state or something like that. At that point, I would possibly move to QGIS and Postgres, although to be honest, I'd probably actually still stay with R and Python. But a lot of you want to just make a viz quickly, you want to get started, I would suggest Tableau is a great place to start, and it's also a great way that someone else can take the same analysis you do and sort of dig into it and quickly figure out what you did. So I wanted to just sort of give a demo of Tableau so you can kind of see what it is, and then at the same time also criticize what I'm doing so you can get an idea of what not to do. Unfortunately, that's we're going to have to cut our eyes off. Yeah, move the window a little bit. I will move the window.
Projector problem. There you go.
Just a second.
Oh.
You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make this shorter.
Perfect. Thank you.
There. Thank you. Yeah. So what this is a data set that I've actually downloaded from King County. King County is the county that I live in that contains Seattle, and it has all of the precincts in it. And I've combined it with another data set that has all of the voting results from 2016. And so I can just come here, and these are all of the fields, which if you're familiar with databases, you know what a field is, but it's in Excel, it's probably going to be one of your columns, or potentially one of your rows, depending on how you're organizing things. You think, okay, I want to do something with this. Well, I've got a geometry. That's always fun, because geometries make maps. And maps are always pretty. And then I can say, all right, what are these? These are all precincts. This is apparently the Stevens precinct. This is the Twin Peaks precinct. Is that where Twin Peaks was filmed? Probably not, but very close. And then I can see, sum of count. And so I can double click on that. And this is great. This is a choropleth map of how much vote did we get per precinct. Now this is very visually appealing, and this is one of the, I would say, first lessons to learn about doing data visualization. Just because you can make a map doesn't mean you should. One thing, when you make a map, your eye is drawn to the thing that's biggest. Is area important when we're doing analysis of data? Probably not. Very rarely is area important. So if you just want to start talking about comparing votes and vote turnout or something, you might want to just come over here and say, let's just do a bar chart. And then immediately it does a bar chart that has the wrong size of everything because we're on a projector. And so you can like make things a little bit bigger. And then you can sort it, and then you can immediately see, yes, this is the precinct that had the highest turnout, less highest turnout, etc. So this is kind of a nice thing that why I suggest using Tableau if you're not sure what's happening in your data source, is it can quickly help you figure out, wait, what's even in there? And then you can be, okay, sweet, now I want to do it by party. I can put party on color. Why are we getting, I don't know what that means. And so then you can be like, okay, I'm really not understanding things, and maybe it doesn't really make sense for 30,000 people to be in a precinct. So we can click on it and look. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this because of the screen size. But once we look at it, we can see that race is not what you were thinking of it. It's what race are we talking about? Is this the US Senate? Is this the presidential race? Is this the various judge races? And so we're actually having all of the different races all combined into one, which is why it's actually really important to understand your data before you start digging into it. And it's second hardest part. The hardest part is actually getting the data. But the second hardest part, which is understanding what is your data even saying. Okay, so if we're like, okay, why don't we just focus on one race? Then we might say, okay, let's just say race, we're going to bring that to the filters shelf and just find the governor's race. Governor, okay. And then now it's just the governor's race. And we can even say, okay, and we also want to, why don't we put party, no, we'll keep party on color, but why don't we also bring party to the row shelf? It's still formatted really weird because we're on a projector, but now it's like easier to sort of compare, and we can turn on labels. So that allows you to explore. Of course, the nice thing about about the map, I said, the map area is not important. But what maps do is they help you figure out what are we talking about. When we're talking about precincts, we probably don't know what any of these precincts are. Having geographic context of where is this actually would be helpful. So what we can do is we can come over here, and now we can make our map. Put in the collection, sum of votes. Sorry, I'm just going to do a little bit of Tableau magic that I already know how to do. Apply to all of my worksheets. Sum of vote on color. And then I'm also going to put precinct on label and make that show up. I said show up. Oh. Yeah, there we go. And then cool. And now if I use this as a filter, I can sort of zoom down to what are the actual results. If I don't use it as a filter, I can just highlight things or come over here and highlight, find out that this is just some tiny little precinct in there that I don't know about. So I'd say this is very good for exploration. So now to, again, come back to, okay, how do you actually do this well? Is this a good data visualization? This helped me figure out what was in the data really well, but some things that are wrong about this. One, my color choices. In some ways, my color choices are good, and in some ways, they're bad. I have chosen to use orange and gray. If I want to really emphasize I am nonpartisan, maybe that's a good idea, but these are Democrats and Republicans. So everyone knows those as blue and red. They're going to recognize your viz much more quickly if you use blue and red. If you want to really emphasize I am not partisan in any way, you might make sure that everything else about your color scheme does not use blue and red. Another thing that's actually really important is all this does is tell you what the results are. It doesn't have a story in it at all. I made a nice viz a while ago, looks like this, that was the Brexit results, the EU referendum results. That was kind of the same idea. It allowed you to sort of click and filter and find out what were the results of every single little district. And that's really compelling right after the election when you just want to know what the results are. But in a sense, this is a tool, but it's not telling a story. So one thing you might want to keep in mind whenever you're making a data visualization is what is it that you're trying to say? And one thing that I might think is, well, if what I'm really trying to say is how does each district compare to all of the others instead of how is it by itself, you might want to, instead of using a bar chart, use something else like this is a little scatter plot, and then this still little highlight thing works where you can click, and you probably can't see, but it's highlighting the little points in here that represent each one. And so you can, instead of seeing how each one is the hard numbers, it allows you to see how does it compare to all of the others. And which one you're going to show really depends on what story you're going to try and say. So these are not necessarily good examples, so I'm going to instead show you a good example that someone else made. This was a visualization that someone else made called The Art of Gerrymandering, 50 Years of Redistricting. Already from this, you know what it's going to tell you, right? It's going to talk about gerrymandering, and it's going to give you some history and put it in context over the last 50 years. One thing that you can say, well, good or bad, this has a lot of text on it. Gerrymandering, definitely, it takes more digging into and more context. So he's combined both visualizations and interactive visualizations. As you hover over this, it actually changes the little icon down there to give you more context about what this is. And so that's something that drags you in and makes you want to look at it. But right next to it is a block of text. And so figuring out how to balance those, where you're actually conveying the information, but putting something there that's going to drag them in, it's always like a hard balancing act. So this is like your classic cracking and packing thing. Then they come down here and tell a story of a single district. Now this is definitely a place where maps are appropriate, because when we're talking about gerrymandering, the shape and size of the district is incredibly important. It's exactly what you're talking about. So maps are definitely going to be part of the story when you're talking about gerrymandering. And I think that this person did it very well, where one, you can see the whole thing, but as you hover over it, you get information about each district, and you can see the history of it. Assuming that the numbers are actually, like, if you're talking about the North Carolina District 3, is that the District 3 throughout entire history? It's debatable, but in a lot of cases it is. And then finally, he made a thing that allowed you to, again, choose your own, like dig into your own, and see how your district compared over time. So if you're curious about California, you could see all of California, or you could narrow in on the 44th and find out how the 44th district changed over time through various congresses. So this is both a tool that you can dig into, but it also definitely tells a story, right? It tells you this is the change of different districts over 50 years. It narrowed in on one district and told the story of it. So I think that this was a fairly good example of a viz trying to explain something about gerrymandering using visualization. So the handout, by the way, the handout is something that I use whenever I make visualizations and want them to be good. It just kind of gives you some things to kind of check and think about whenever you make a viz to make sure that it's actually on track and telling the story that you want to. So I just thought it would be a great thing to hand out if you want to get into your visualization. I've in the past found this very helpful.
All right, let's thank our speaker. All right, so I think I'll shuffle a little bit myself. No problem. All right, so I guess I'll ask you and then hand off the microphone. So one of the themes that we heard in a lot of today's and yesterday's talks in the mornings was also reflected in your talk, which is that you said the hardest part is actually getting the data. And so my question is, do you have any lessons from projects that you've worked on in the past that can help us encourage our efforts in the future in this particular direction?
In terms of getting the data, it's hard. I don't know. I mean, basically my job is for a company getting data and making it match with each other. That is like my job. Don't expect it to be easy. I guess it's just a lot to learn. You have to learn. Don't expect it to be easy. I think some people do come into it expecting it to be easy, but honestly, how you structure the data matters. Even if you get it from, the stories of getting data from counties, they're not supposed to charge you. Supposedly, like, whenever a county charges you for data, it's only supposed to be for reproduction cost. But a lot of counties are basically looking for any way to make up their budget, and so they will charge you. Getting data is hard, cleaning data is hard. Look for the tools that already exist. R and Python are great. Alteryx is another one that you have to pay a lot of money for, but is really good. It is getting easier day by day because it's something that people are focusing on, but just actually like learn how data is structured. I don't think it's the
Actually,
best.
just a second question popped up on our form, which I think is quite easy for you to answer, so I'll hand it to you. What is a tooltip?
Oh, sorry about that. The tooltips, when I hovered over it, there was like this little thing that popped up that gave some like, this is the racial makeup. This is the name of the district. That's called the tooltip. Sorry about using jargon.
All right.